Hi, it's the Finnish Football Show. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for episode 13. I'm Mark Wiltshire from Explore Finland radio show. As ever, I'm joined by my co-host, Mark from FC Suomi. Hi, Mark.
Hello.
And Rich from Escape to Suomi. Hi, Rich.
Hello.
And as ever, Rich, you had your Twitter poll this week. So tell us, everyone, now, first of all, some of us can see it. What shirt are you wearing?
Well, this week I'm wearing the current Finland home shirt, which I picked up from Sports Direct for 20 quid, not the 90 euros that it's on sale at Fanimo.
Not bad. Maybe you should start exporting them from the UK to Finland.
I'll take a cut off my Cashly. I think the problem is with these polls is that because I put a national team shirt in with Cups and Asiko, needless to say, that's quite a small market, and you know you're already covering Asiko, and I've got a Cups mug, so it's
everyone's covered.
You sound disappointed.
Well, it's a shame that you know I obviously put some poor data in, and you know everyone else of every other club is going to vote for Finland, so it's okay. I don't know.
So was I the only one that voted for Asiko?
Yeah, I had a couple of hundred votes, and won for Asiko.
You had a couple of hundred votes on what shirt you should wear?
Yeah.
Man, you should use that for the good of the world, not just for deciding how to get dressed in the morning.
Yeah, and you shouldn't limit it to the shows. You should do it like every day.
I think I might do. Which socks?
Yeah.
So you're wearing the current home shirt?
Yeah, I mean, I know what I wear to work every day. It's the same thing. But yeah, no, this was 20 quid from Sports Direct, and they're still available. So, you know, if you want me to get you one,
that's good.
If you want me to get you one, it's 50 quid, and I'll send it over.
Wow, you've got to have a markup.
That's still cheaper though. It's still like half price at the beginning of the year.
and Mark, what are you wearing? It looks like you could do with an update.
Yeah, I do need. This is a this is a Finnish shirt from. It was a tournament that we played in 2004. I represented some. I was part of the British expat team, and this was part of the Finnish team. We were in. What was it called? It was back when where Huuhkajat Stadium was the Finnish stadium, and it was one of those international corporate football events. So not as impressive as $20 bucks. But I swapped this with some guy from Huuhkajat's staff alongside.
So you did a shirt swap at the end of the. Did you do it at half time, like the modern way, or did you at least wait till the game was finished?
No, I waited till the game was finished, and you can tell by the relative cleanliness of the shirt how close we got to them, which was not close at all.
So as everyone listening can tell, we haven't spoken for a long time. We've already started chatting about the minutiae of our lives. I'm only on point 1 of the introduction to this show, so this is going to go on for a while. The episode is live on YouTube. We've got some people watching now, so if you're listening to us, use the chat box on the side of the YouTube page there, and say hi. Let us know who you are and where you're watching from, and if you've got any comments to add to the show as we go along, then by all means use that box to get in touch with us. And I've lost my notes. So this is Finnish Football Show 13, the first one of 2017. Although there have been a couple of Finnish Football Shorts episodes recently, so if you haven't heard those yet, please check them out. And I want to say thank you to everyone who gave me positive feedback on the interview I did just last week with the new manager at Asiko, Sixten Bostrom. But we'll get on to that a little bit later. But the comments I received were very kind, so thank you. In this episode, we are going to look at Finland's January friendlies versus Morocco and Slovenia, which took place in Abu Dhabi. We'll look at the new format Suomen Cup and recent transfers involving some Finnish players. And yeah, I guess we'll have to take a look at recent events at Ashiko, which, yeah, more of that to come. But in planning this show, it looks like we're going to have a lot to talk about. So live viewers, you're going to see and hear the whole conversation. But anyone listening to the podcast, you're going to have to wait for a second episode, a bonus pod that's going to come along soon. But I'm not putting a timetable on that. We're going to spread out this content. By God, there's little enough of it, so we're going to make the most of it and string it out a little while. The live viewers, as I say, use that message box or use Twitter. Use the hashtag FFS13, FFS13. Maybe Rich, as ever, you can keep an eye on that. We don't get a lot of interaction on there, but just in case. Podcast listeners, by all means, use social media to get in touch with us. On Facebook, we've got this Finnish Football Show group. It's a private group, private group, but we kind of let anyone join. So go into Facebook, find the Finnish Football Show group and join there. And there's people sharing different stories related to Finnish football, and occasionally some interesting little discussions crop up from time to time.
Gossip.
And otherwise, our Twitter handles, Mark there is at FC Suomi, Rich is at Escape to Suomi, and mine is at Explore Finland. So hopefully this podcast will come out in a couple of days or so. So without further ado, Rich, as ever, no noisy biscuits, no F-bombs, please. And in line with tradition, let's go with some recent news. I think that Mark, there was some talk about a couple of Finnish players overseas doing quite well, or maybe one doing very well and one not so well. What's going on with Joel Pohjanpalo and Jere Urunen?
Yeah, so I mean, Joel Pohjanpalo in Bayer Leverkusen, he's not getting a lot of minutes at the minute, it was raised a bit in the Facebook group with Keith raised the point that he needs a solid string of like games. He needs a lot of minutes and a lot of playing time, but for that, and there's a large movement like on Twitter and in a lot of the sort of social media forums that say that Jolle needs more game time. He needs to be playing more, which is true. But I mean, one of the harsh realities of playing for Bayer Leverkusen and playing in the Bundesliga is that you don't just get starts. And he's had 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, and in the Champions League last Tuesday, he got half an hour against Atletico Madrid. When it was 3-2, he then had a pretty decent chance on the edge of the box, and he fluffed it. I mean, he connected with it, but it sort of bobbled wide in a relatively good position where he just had the keeper to beat. And the basic problem with sort of elite player levels or playing in the Bundesliga or the Champions League is that if you don't take that chance, it's going to be a long time till you get the next one. So it's so for Jolle, it's a bit tough going at the minute. I mean he's still a young lad and he's still a top quality player. He just needs to take his chances more. And it's quite strange that a lot of people in Finland talk about Jolle a lot when we've got somebody like Jere Urunen at Genk, who's playing week in, week out, who's a big part of the defense. It's taken no time at all to become a regular player in Genk's first team, and he played again Thursday night in the Europa League, kept a clean sheet or helped his defense keep a clean sheet, and now they're through to the last 16 in the Europa League. And I know it's a slightly different competition, but it's quite strange how we've got one player who just can't seem to take his chance, who gets all the headlines, and then we've got another player who's working, playing games 90 minutes week in, week out, performing very, very well, playing against. I mean, in the Belgian league, he's playing against wingers who play for Cameroon, Nigeria, Japan. There's a lot of talent in that league, and yet he's not getting any coverage. So those two players they're a good sort of example of how we talk about Finnish football, at least at the minute, which is that when we've got a guy who's close and not making it, we give him all the press and we start all the discussions about. When we've got a guy who's grinding out and playing week in, week out at a really, really good level, we're not somehow focusing on him or giving him his dues. So he deserves his dues.
Yeah, good stuff. And let's keep an eye on those and other Finnish players overseas. People can keep an eye on your website at fcsuomi.com.
Yeah, and I mean, with keeping our eyes on players overseas, this about 3 hours ago, Boris Alexander Koko scored his first goal for the Newcastle Jets in the Australian A-League. So it was a 1-1 draw against Adelaide, I think. So check it out on YouTube. Boris is off.
But bless you for sticking to the script and not pulling out a complete rabbit out of the hat.
It's not as bad when I do the like planned part first and the surprise part second, is it?
It sounds like you're adding something to the show rather than just completely derailing it. Yeah, well done for that one.
Cheers.
Rich, why don't you tell us a little bit about this Euro 2024 bid?
Yeah, basically last year the FAs of Finland, Denmark, Sweden and Norway had planned, basically they have a little group, as it were. They tend to vote in blocks for things like FIFA presidents and so on. Between them, they were talking about hosting a joint Euro 2024. Last night, the president of the Swedish FA has come out and said that they're not going to bid for Euro 2024 because at the moment they're not clear whether they'll have the sort of stadiums up to standard. And if we go by France last year, they needed to host 51 games, and you need the stadia that so many at 30,000, so many at 40,000, and they're not particularly confident that they'll be ready and be able to put together a bid with some proper substance. They haven't ruled out 2028, but in the meantime, they're going to concentrate on potentially a joint bid between 2 or 3 countries for the Women's World Cup in 2023 or the one in 2027. And it's not a surprise. The Olympia Stadion in Helsinki it's becoming the new Wembley in more ways than one. It's the amount of money it's costing. I think the last estimate was well over 300 million euros, and that wasn't for a complete rebuild. The amount of public funding that's being asked for has doubled, and it's becoming, already they haven't even finished tearing what they need to down yet. The webcam and the pictures, it just shows lots of diggers having a laugh in the snow. The Finland FA's ultimate dream really is to host a Europa League final or maybe a European Super Cup, but it seems to be getting further and further away. And now they're talking about, if they want to keep down public funding, they're going to have to either reduce the capacity, which will impact on any potential sort of hosting events, or losing some of the VIP sort of facilities, which kind of defeats the point of them doing it anyway, because that's what UEFA want in a stadium. And it's a shame, but Euro 2024 looks like it's going to be between Germany and Turkey. So if we're going to have the tournament that Finland might actually qualify for, we're looking at 11 years now, and by then we'll have a 48-team World Cup as well. So it's a long.
Yeah, and that's also. Sorry, Rich. That's also going to impact on how all tournaments are hosted in the future. It remains to be seen exactly how they're going to do this. Which it's going to be clusters of countries that are co-hosting competitions, and then I think it looks like it's going to be that there will be host countries, but none of them will be guaranteed a spot in the finals, because the finals will be spread so far. You'd have like a half a dozen host countries all guaranteed a spot, which wouldn't work. So
well, that's certainly the case with 2020, where there's 13 host countries, albeit it's a slightly different format. Say London will host the semi-finals and the final, but you're looking at certainly the World Cup anyway. They've now said that 3 countries can group together and host one. But for 48-team World Cup, they're talking about potentially a joint bid between the US, Canada, and Mexico. And the distances between those places is enormous.
Yeah.
They want, there was talk of hosting a centenary World Cup in Uruguay. Uruguay's tiny. It's small. It's smaller than Finland in terms of people and size. And inevitably you'll end up having one at some point, probably hosted by an entire continent, albeit a small one. you might actually have a South American World Cup or a North American World Cup, and and again, we talk about 48-team World Cup. The number of European participants isn't really going to increase by much. They're talking about 16 guaranteed places. So, we go back to the age-old argument of, well, it's not going to make any difference to Finland. So.
No, it's not for Finland, but for the greater good of football, it's going to bring more countries from outside of Europe.
Yeah.
And
while that's good, though, they don't change the sort of stadium requirements part, which means that when you expand to a 48-team World Cup, you'll have El Salvador against Gabon or whoever, or Burkina Faso, who are on the up. And you'll have that in a stadium that has a 20 or 30,000 capacity, and you won't get the fans in to go and see it because you'll be playing in, I don't know, in a Scandic sort of collaboration. How can you guarantee that? So it's in a way it's really kind of self-defeating, because no one country could ever have the capacity to have that kind of tournament. But when you have that kind of tournament, you don't have the quality to attract the amount of fans to fill the stadium for the requirements. So it generally seems like one of those cases where bureaucracy is run amok a little bit.
The one country that probably could host a 48-team World Cup would be the USA, and yet, like you say, try and host. They're trying to still sell football as a spectator sport, and it is improving. But they hosted the Copa America last summer, and there were stadiums that were a quarter full because punters aren't going to go in Philadelphia, aren't going to go and watch Honduras against whoever on a Tuesday night.
Yeah, because what they do in the States is they co-opt American football stadiums.
Yeah,
and which is great because there's tons of them. But on the downside, it means that you've got basically a whole bunch of clubs in American football that you need to pay, and a whole bunch of fans who don't particularly care.
Yeah, that's true. Although in my interview with Sixten Astikor the other day, he was saying that the MLS, or that MLS is now like in the top 10 of attendances, people watching, often 40, 50,000 plus attending the football games. So it's definitely growing over there, and the league seems to be growing every year. There's a couple more teams. So it is pretty much probably the only individual country, maybe outside of the sort of top 5 European leagues, country that could do it all by itself. But maybe if there's so many countries, it's not such a bad thing to have a group of 4 or 5 countries that are geographically quite close together, and have one group in this country, one group in that country, and then they all start to come together into one central location for the later stages.
Yeah, I think you've got a lot on. It's maybe for another time, but a lot of the being around a tournament that has a host country or a host city, and the buzz around that, and if it was one of the issues they had in the 2002 World Cup in Japan and Korea, where you had half the tournament was taking place in Korea, half of it in Japan. So where is the home? Where is and then if you base all the admin and all the I'm sure the FIFA bods will want to be clustered together for their hotels and restaurants and that. You're not going to split them up. It might make them behave better if you take them apart, but even so, it's something now that and again, there are more countries playing football than there were 20, 30 years ago, and that's why the Euro is about to expand as well. But it's at what point, and slightly off topic, we're looking at the skiing this week in Lahti, and the Venezuelan geezer who made an absolute, he's gone viral, shall we say, and. But he
has gone viral. Yeah.
But this is a world championship, and was there no? Well, there was apparently no sort of pre-qualifying anything. As long as he's officially registered with the tournament, he can turn up, and they do the qualifying there and then. So, you're getting to the point where you're letting everyone get involved, but at the expense of the overall quality.
Let's keep an eye on the Euro 2024. Bid, Rich, and maybe come back to that in future episodes. And now let me steer things back towards Finland. Why not? And my news story was the kind of continuing weakening of Astikor from champions just over a year and a half, or just over a year ago. Started last season weakly, built it built a stronger team during the summer of 2016, and it all seems to be falling away again. We'll talk about the change in manager a little bit later, but just going, Roope Riski has gone to Paderborn in the Bundesliga 2. Juhani Ojola just transferred to BK Häcken in Sweden. And then the news that Mate Radetzky injured himself. The actual injury is undisclosed. I've been told that generally in Finland you don't tell exactly what's gone on with a player's injury, so it's just being sort of explained by the club as, I think it translates as a lower limb injury, but it's going to keep him out all season. So I think we're free to speculate that it's probably worse than a break, and maybe it's ligaments or something like that. That would seem to be the sort of injury to keep you out that long. And I don't know, from the optimism of ending last season and let's build on this team that's playing well to, oh, bugger me, we're starting again.
You see Vasara retired as well. So that's, if you look, so if you lose Roope Riski, Vasara, Radetzky and Juhani Ojola, that's the spine of your team that won the Finnish Cup. So it's a tough old job that Sixten has inherited. But I mean, I'd imagine that's, I suppose, as you said, we'll talk about it later, but I'd imagine that was a pretty big contributing factor to Simo's departure. I mean, I don't know. There's obviously a lot of stuff on the forums, but I would imagine he's looked at the team and said, well, we need about 3-4 players here to keep ourselves in the title race. And why don't we go into that now? Why don't we move over and talk about the manager thing? I think it was, for all ASICOR fans, it was a big shock. Simo's been popular. He's been successful. He's quite outgoing and expressive on the sidelines, and kind of dragged the team upwards and dragged the fans along with him. And from the outside, it seemed that just like that, he was gone. And I know that there's a lot of people unhappy about it, but I think you're right. I think the club wants to do things a certain way. It wants to develop its own young players. It wants to bring them through into the squad, and I think the supporters agree with that. Supporters everywhere love seeing the young players coming through into the team. Last season, Daniel Benningkangas, there's another one who's left and gone to Ilves, and that was his choice to leave. I know no more than he had a contract offer and decided to leave. But he'd come through from the academy in the last few years, and basically last year he kept Timo Tavanainen out of the team, and the fans like seeing that. And now we've got Elias Arde come back from a year loan at FC Jazz. There's Emil Lidman, who was in and around the first team squad in the championship winning season. And was away last year and is now kind of back around the squad. There's Onni Valakari. That'll be interesting now that Simo's gone. But he's been playing a lot. Yeah. So say that again, Rich.
His other boy as well, Paavo. He's been playing.
He's the goal. Yeah, he's the goalkeeper, probably playing for the academy. I'm guessing.
Well, he's played some of the friendlies for the first team.
The friendlies. Yeah. Okay. And the fans want to see these boys coming through, but I think Simo wanted bigger, more established, and ultimately more expensive players to come straight into the squad. And I guess that's what caused friction between the club and him, and has ultimately seen this parting of ways. I think when you look at the players that have gone, I can see Simo's point.
Yeah, and I mean it's in so Simo's. He also has a great appreciation in the Palloliitto and the association. They think he's the sort of kind of future face of Finnish football coaching and management. But by the same token, we know that Simo is not like let's say he's not a detailed organization type guy. So if you've got if you've got a squad that's heavy on young players, it's very difficult to succeed with that kind of what you need. You need old heads around the team to try and organize what happens on the pitch, because they basically can rely on their professionalism and their experience. So if you're going to drill, if you've got young players, what you want to do is something like Sir Alex Ferguson would do, or David Moyes used to do at Everton, which is drill to make sure that everything ran like clockwork. Something actually that I think Sixten Borstrom could probably achieve. But if you're somebody who's a bit more open and progressive, if trying new things as Sessuko did at the start of last season when Losar came in, then you kind of generally sort of fall back on the experience of the older players to bring that organizational element in. So it's so it's I can see that there's just a part in the ways that if you want to go down the youth path, Simo's probably not the best choice or optimal choice.
Yeah, and the comment has been made to me, and this wasn't by Larry, so I'm not trying to telling things that's been passed on in confidence, but but there is a difference in Sixten's organisation. That he in the first week has already got the next 4 weeks of training planned out, and that's very different to Simo's style, where training was planned out much more at short notice. And that kind of fits in with what you're saying, Mark, about if you've got younger players and you want to get them organised and you want to get them disciplined, then having a routine and having a structure is important in that. The flip side, I'm just looking at the Ashikor squad at the moment from the website, and there's 19 players listed there. Mate Radetzky, who's clearly out already. So there's some work to be done. And when I spoke to Sixten, obviously it was his first day, so give him some slack. He hadn't yet had a chance to do the work to decide which players they need to bring in. But again, it looks to me like as at the beginning of last season, there needs to be some defenders coming in. There's a good back four there. In fact, there's 5 defenders listed, so there's a good back 5. But at least there's a decent back 4. But there's not really any backup.
But the thing you look at, the friendly on Friday against Haka, which they've already started fielding the trialists that seem to be doing the rounds in Finland at this time of year, where there were 2 that had been at Cups and didn't get a contract, so now they've moved on to Seinäjoki, and especially. Asiko already, well into their pre-season, albeit with a new manager. But the fact that they're, in the Suomen Cup, they'll be certainly probably qualify from. We'll go on to that later. I don't know which round they'll qualify into, but it's they've got to look at who have they got, and if the depth isn't there, and this is a problem in Finland in general, and maybe Sixten's more methodical approach may help in terms of injury prevention and maybe getting a little bit more momentum. But when you think that by far their most important player, Mehmet Hetemay, is still there, but take him away. Last season he basically kept them going, albeit with some of Risky's goals, but they've we talked about before about the spine of that team is virtually gone now. You've got Axelu, the goalkeeper, and Hetemay. Everyone else, is fairly interchangeable, and they need some, strong characters in there as well. But you've lost players who've had a bit of a winning mentality. Bear in mind this is a team that's won the league one season. It still won the cup last year. It'll be in the Europa League this year. These are big games, and you need some. It sounds a bit old-fashioned, but you need some sort of personalities in there as well. And hopefully, Bostrom, he won the Veikkaus League with Huuhkajat, which is my sort of experience of him. But he had a rotten luck of injuries. But again, he needed some senior people in that club who were winners, who dragged them over into the title, albeit at cancer. But I think at Asiko, he does have his work cut out, because you look at Mariehamn aren't going to be the same as last year. But Huuhkajat, they surely will at least improve.
They look really strong.
Yeah, I mean, they've recruited well. They're looking, they've cut some of the dead weight out of the squad and they've replaced it with, decent quality, and they've promoted some players from their youth academy as well. I mean, yet again, they're going back to being that team that actually it's always harder to defend the title than to win it. And last season was almost, to be expected as things change. But, losing the coach that's been there for what, 5, 6, 7 years, it's going to be a big thing, especially, last season, the new stadium came in, which was a big change halfway through and everything else. So I think it's going to have to be almost a sort of backs to the wall from the start, just to get that core settled and, bring in, it will be the usual, I'm sure, free transfers and wasters from across the world who end up in Finland at some point. And you'll have to...
Thanks, Rich. That fills me with confidence.
But no, but it will be, you get the people who, and they do turn up, and some of them are absolutely fantastic, but they're, the journeymen, the players who've obviously got agents in Finland and whatever, and some of them will turn up and do very well, and if actually people can get hold of a couple of them, but they will need people who are winners, and preferably in Finland, because it's, yes, it's not the highest quality of football, but it is what it is, and it's a very different way of playing. The league's so condensed into the sort of 5.5, 6 months of the season. It's a very, very different mentality.
Did Tuko left as well, didn't he? He went to Ilves.
He went to Ilves as well, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so with Tuko and Roope Riski out of the picture, how many goals is that? That's what, 30 goals that you've lost, plus the spine. It's, I mean, that's hard for any team.
Yeah, Billy Irons obviously came in midway through last season. He's a proven goal scorer, and he has scored goals both in the league last year and in the Suomen Cup this year. And then there's also Aristote Mboma, or Totti, as he likes to have on the back of his shirt. And he looks lively. He looks sharp. Elias Arte is looking sharp, and Onni Valakari as well. They're all looking quite lively and quite sharp up there, but they're all young. Even Billy Irons, with all his experience, is only in his early 20s. So I think your comment there stands, Mark, about needing a bit of experience. And I guess the next big step, and the chance really for the fans to see what Sixton's been able to do, even just in sort of a week or so, is the final Suomen Cup game on Wednesday. It's home game against Vasa. Hope of playing it outside, but since we had I don't know, half a metre of snowfall in the last few days, I've seen that it's now been switched back to indoors at Wolfsport Arena, which is a shame, but not completely unexpected. And we need to get there and get behind the team and let the club and the management do what they need to do to get the players in that we need, I guess.
Yeah, and I think just maybe one more thing. If you think about this time last year, so for all that it's going to be difficult. This time last year, SECO had a pretty solid forward line, a relatively settled squad, and they brought in a very experienced Finnish international by the name of Aleksi Järvenko Jr. And we all thought that's going to work out a treat. So maybe there's a bit of hope that we're now in a kind of the opposite situation.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. So we went with high expectations last year and came crashing down, and now this year we go with lower expectations. Maybe it's all about perspective. Why don't we, as we just touched on Suomen Cup, why don't we talk a bit about that? My agenda is all out of sync, but that's okay. We're covering everything that we needed to cover, and Suomen Cup is kind of coming towards an end now, or the group stages at least are. And just for those that aren't completely aware of what's going on, I've made a few notes here. So this competition kicked off on the 29th of July last year.
Before last
with Oulun Kula versus, sorry?
Before last year's final.
Yes, yeah, that's true. Yeah. With Oulun Kula versus Jokerit, with a 2-0 win for Oulun Kula. Then there was the qualifying rounds pre-Christmas, and then this regionalised group stages in early 27. And I've got a few comments about each group, so maybe I'll go through those, and then maybe one of you can explain how qualification from the groups works and how it goes on from here.
That made a whole lot of
well, let's keep
It's not me.
short from where we are right now.
Yeah.
But there's five groups at the moment, 5 groups of 6. And Group A, I just thought it was worth giving a bit of love to KPV, KPV from Kokkola. They're a Ukkonen team. They finished mid-table last season. They've won 3 out of 3 in Group A. And they've got two more games left against Arce Oulu and OPS, which could both be winnable games. So they could find themselves through to the next round. In Group B, there's Asiko, Yaro, and VPS, all on 9 points, all with a game to go. And those final games are Asiko versus VPS and Yaro versus Yaz. So Yaro should beat Jazz from Pori, and then it's Asiko and VPS to see who can win that division. Group C, Hoyiko have 12 points and Honka have 9, so they're well ahead of the pack. Similarly, in Group D, Inter and Mariehamn both on 10 points ahead of everybody else. And in Group E, Kups and Ilves both have 12 points. The thing of notice there was Lahti, who are bottom of their group on 1 point, so they're not having a very good Suomen Cup campaign so far. How does the qualification work? Who wants to take that one?
I'll go with that for a laugh. Right, so of the 5 groups, the group winners will go through to the quarterfinals, which makes perfect sense. However, there will be a round now, I guess is round 7 before the quarterfinals. So the 5 runners-up from the group and the best 3rd place team will go. There'll be 3 matches, and the 3 winners of those ties will join the group winners in the quarterfinals. So there is an inherent advantage in winning the group, because you get unless you want extra games, that you go straight through. Of course, no one. It's impossible at the moment because there's still a round of games left. Plus, there's a couple of games today. The way it works out is, it's quite easy. Everyone plays each other, but and it's an open draw. But you'll end up with there's no seeding, so the teams in the quarterfinals could quite easily play the same teams that they play in the group stage. And again, the draw for the quarterfinals is actually going to be made on a week Monday, so it'll be just after, but before one of the groups is finished, because it's been made quite clear that, well, the 3rd place team in that group isn't going to make it, so we might as well make the draw anyway. I don't know. But yeah, so that's basically it. So if you don't like playing football, win the group. But if you look at
that's cleared everything up, Rich. Thanks for that.
Yeah, but if you look at Group B, for example, we talked about it before. You've got Asiko, Yaro, and VPS all have 9 points. FC Yaz could still technically come 3rd place in that group.
Yeah, they could. That's true.
I mean, it's incredibly unlikely.
Swing.
It's incredibly unlikely, and with Yaz, the only way is up. But it's one of those things.
Oh, yeah, no, that's terrible. That's really terrible.
But you've got 3, potentially 4 teams there who still have a lot to play for, and you could have a thing where the best 3rd place team could quite easily have 10 points. And it's certainly the closest group anyway. Although you have had the Asiko Academy team who, for some reason, were put in that group. They have played 4, lost 4, and conceded 25 goals.
Well, if they're geographical groups, Rich, Asiko Academy is located pretty close to Asiko.
It is, but the groups were altered for that to happen. And also, Musa have already been knocked out and then re-entered the group stage, which is one of those weird things about Finland. They got knocked out in August,
Right.
And then because of their performance in the league, they got put into the group stage as one of the 4 Kakkonen sort of qualifying playoff competitors. So despite being knocked out, they then got re-entered, not on a wild card, but purely because why not?
But it was the same for Asiko's Academy, though, wasn't it? They lost to Ligurius Inter back in.
Yeah, but that was kind of a already decided thing. That was kind of a certain number of runners up from that group, from that round, will go back in. Musa had been knocked out 4 months previously in round 2.
Yeah.
And
I think that there's been this debate in the UK about under 21 sides playing in the Football League Cup, as it whatever name it goes by this year. But you know, in the past we had the Liga Cup, and that was pre-season. It was indoors, and it always kind of felt like a pre-season warm-up competition.
Yeah.
Which it was.
You know, in the past, Asiko organised this Komia tournament, which was 4 different teams get together and have a warm-up competition. Then Liga Cup, they're in Liga Cup for a few years, and that sort of took the place of the Komia competition. And now it seems like the Liga Cup's gone and Suomen Cup's just become a pre-season warm-up. And you know, we were talking about this. I was at the Musa game and talking to a few of the other fans, and without knowing it, that seemed to be the attitude people had. It was like, oh no, this is really good because it gives the smaller clubs the opportunity to play against the bigger clubs, and they get a few games to see how good they are, and almost like practice and get better. And I'm thinking, but that's not what a knockout cup competition should really be about.
Yeah,
you know, indoor football here always makes me feel like it's a practice rather than a real game. Anyway, so that. And then Asiko's first game was against their own academy, and I was just like,
Well, I mean, yeah, you mentioned at the start Lahti, who I think are pretty sure to not qualify. I think they're bottom of their group, and
they're bottom. They've drawn 1 out of 4 games,
and that's sort of acceptable in a pre-season environment, because if it was the Liga Cup, they won the Liga Cup, by the way, last year in its last. So they're still the holders of it, I guess. But that's all right if you go into it with a pre-season mentality. But now they've lost their pass to the latter stages of the Suomen Cup, the chance to win a trophy that gets you into Europe, because basically this part of the competition is played during pre-season. I mean, I think the other one in danger is Huuhkajat. I think they're not yet. They can still qualify, but they're not. I think they're fourth.
They're out.
Yeah. Are they out already?
Yeah, they can't.
So Muurinen only just came back from his winter vacation. You know what I mean? He hasn't decided on the squad. They haven't had like a full round of preseason matches, because I mean, they've got a good setup, but because it's preseason, that's sort of what happens. You know what I mean? It's not like, and so these clubs, these big Veikkausliiga clubs that lower league teams want to play, are missing their chance to get in, to progress in a credible competition. And while the format should make those Veikkausliiga teams take preseason more seriously, I think all it's done is devalued the end product of the Veikkausliiga. Of the Veikkausliiga and the Suomen Cup, because what you've got is teams dropping out just because they're not fit enough, or they're trying a new system and it's not working, or they've got 1 or 2 signings to bed in, and they're not quite up to speed yet. So for me, you're punishing teams for the wrong reasons.
And yet 3 teams have all.
And the winner of Suomen Cup, is there still a European place for that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, 3
finally played here in Seinäjoki next autumn, so you know it would be something I think that Asiko definitely have on their mind, is wanting to play in that final in that home stadium, of course.
But not against their own academy.
It won't be happening now. No. And it's like personally happening. You know, for the academy guys, yeah, of course it's a great experience. Okay, they've been losing, but they're playing against men's teams, so that's going to be a good experience. But you don't really want it in the final, do you? Mark, what were you going to say?
That was Rich that you got.
I know we were just saying your mic was buzzing, but I mean, you've had issues before. You know, we've all joked, and it's happened here where, you know, teams play their own academies, or, you know, Huuhkajat 4 played Huuhkajat 3 last year, and it was, it was quite funny because they had a joint huddle at the start of the game, and we joked on our Facebook group about Asicor. We were sort of talking about, well, who wears which kit, and it turns out that the academy wore the home kit purely because the senior side hadn't had their shirts printed up for the season, and it was more of a logistic issue, and the goalkeepers warmed up together. But then someone, to be fair, on Twitter did say that the Spanish Cup final, in my lifetime anyway, have had Real Madrid against their own academy in the final.
Yeah.
So, it's not just a Finnish thing, it's funny. But like we said about, Hifke, the manager was on holiday, and they'd already been knocked out by the time he got back. His first game back, they won. But, say they can now concentrate on the Veikkausliiga, which is still 6 weeks away. But, they've got no more cup football to look forward to. We've also got what seems to be popping up regularly now is basically children playing in this tournament. Ops have had a 14-year-old playing for him. Admittedly, he's the manager's son. But, he's 14 years old.
Totally earned it.
Oh, of course. And again, another poll I did on the Twitter a couple of weeks ago, what were you doing at 14? And most of us were probably drinking and smoking and playing Nintendo and this, that and the other. And he's playing senior cup football. And the chap, well, I say chap, he's 15, played for Rops, scored his first goal, and shortly after signed for Midtjylland in Denmark and joined the sort of Finnish expat community there. So
15,
and he scored his first goal in the cup game. And every week it sort of comes out that I think that same weekend 6 or 7 other 15-year-olds played for, there was one for Mariehamn, FC Yaz played a couple. These are kids who then came over to England and played in the under-16 tournament. And of course, they had to be withdrawn from their men's senior cup teams to play in an under-16 kickabout with lads, on the books of Liverpool and Man United.
The exodus of Finnish players starts earlier and earlier. Soon they'll be just picking them up from the maternity wing of the hospital and carting them off overseas into these incubator academies.
They give every kid born in the hospital a baby grow, and I think they had 200 saved. It's a good idea.
But don't worry, the way the system works at the minute, they'll all be back, at 19.
It's true, yeah. How about we move on from Suomen Cup? We'll report back how the knockout stages work once we've figured out who's actually going to be playing in them in future episode. Let's talk about the friendlies in the desert, and I just want to show you this because I actually made notes.
Wow.
Yes.
While I was watching, because and this was a long time ago now, and I had to dig out these notes today and just read them while you were talking earlier, because I remember watching the Morocco game, and the Morocco game finished with a win.
Yeah,
it'd been a whole of 2016 had been defeats and draws, and then came a win, which was incredible. And I wrote in my notes that the goal was scored by Juhani Ojala, and so I put that made the score Morocco 0, Asicor 1. I guess I was feeling quite optimistic at the time. I didn't know it was going to disappear a few weeks later. But let me give you my comments, and then you guys can come in on that game, because the Slovenia game on the Friday was played at 5 o'clock finish time, and I couldn't watch it because I had hungry kids to feed, and that had to take priority over sitting on my backside for 2 hours watching football. So I'll let you guys take that away. Finland played a can't even read that note, 4-5-1 formation, and seemed that Forsell was getting back and sort of helping out with the defending from the front. Too many, but there were many long balls lumped forward into space, i.e. lumped forward to no one in particular. But Morocco were quite physical, dirty, even maybe. And then we scored the goal. Ojala unchallenged with a header to take the win for Huuhkajat. And then in the second half, just that Robert Taylor missed a sitter, and then 1-0 OMFG. And that seems to be the end of my notes. I think that just to say that Morocco created very little, although they looked quite tricky and threatening in approach, and that Finland was solid in defence without really creating too much excitement going forward, apart from the goal.
Yep, La Révolution begins. Like that's Marco Canova down to a T. Defend solidly, pack the middle of the pitch. Try and counterattack with pace and accuracy. Use set pieces well to our advantage. So I think one thing that we can't overlook is that Morocco, that was a full strength Morocco team against let's say fringe players of Finland's national side, and they were in combat mode, ready for the African Cup of Nations, where they went on. They did all right, I think, actually, Morocco. So they weren't. They were no mugs going into the game. I think there was they made a raft of changes in the second half, but I think they set up quite well, and we basically set up to stop them and hit them on the counter attack. Petteri Forsell, like you mentioned, he looked pretty good. He was good on the ball, and he was up and down the pitch quite a lot, which is an improvement because usually he doesn't move so freely, although he did visibly tired towards the end of the game. But yeah, I mean, defensively we were sound. Going forward, we did make some chances down the flanks. Matej Hradecki was also, in addition to Robert Taylor, was pretty impressive. Yeah, so it was, in a way, it's sort of, I was a bit blinded by the performance because we got a win. You know what I mean? Like, it was just sort of it was a bit of a shock. And I think what's more than that, we specifically looked like we set up to hold on and then achieved that goal of holding on, because Bakke, in his time, set up almost every game to just hold on to a point or hold on to a lead, and we couldn't do it. So
figuring out a way to actually get the lead in the first place.
yeah, he never needed it. But yeah, we reverted back to 4-4-2 and looked stronger for it. And Viitala in net, he had a really good game against Morocco. So yeah, they had a couple of hairy moments, but we did really good. And yeah, I was very happy.
Nice to have something positive to talk about the Huuhkajat performance and result. How did it differ in
Slovenia? It didn't actually differ that much. I mean, we lost 2-0 to a really weak Slovenia team. So I think we spend a lot of time under Miksu and then under Bakke pining for the good old days of a well-organized team. But one of the problems, we had a lot of problems before Miksu's revolution came and the Christmas tree came. One of them was that when we played weaker teams, we generally didn't assert ourselves, and we did the hard stuff well, but we didn't do the easy games. I mean, there was a couple of terrible trips to places like Moldova and Andorra where we couldn't get wins. Kazakhstan was terrible, and it was very much the same thing. We created a lot of chances. We moved the ball around well. We moved the opposition around well, and then Slovenia hit a 30-yard free kick that was just one of those absolute beauties. It didn't have a lot of pace on it, so you kind of assumed that Viitala would get there, but it was 100% postage stamp, the free kick. And then in the second half, they punted a ball into the box and Viitala dropped it, and it was a tap in for the guy. It literally just bounced at the Slovenian guy's feet, and that was 2-0. So those kind of games happen. Like, it was a great finish for the first goal and a terrible mistake for the second. Apart from that, we dominated the play. Although they did have apart from that, they had a penalty, Slovenia, and it could have been 3, but we survived that.
But it was a very different team as well, wasn't it? It was almost all the players that didn't start on Monday started on the Friday. So almost everyone got some kind of run out during.
Yeah. I think it was only Viitala and Matej Hradecki who stayed, who played in both games. And Hradecki against Slovenia had a couple of chances actually, so he did all right. But I mean, all in all, it wasn't as bad it wasn't as bad as the result suggests. It was just one of those things. They had a pearler of a free kick, and we had a howler of a mistake, and that was the 2 goals that we lost. Apart from that, we didn't really press, and whenever we made chances, we couldn't seem to finish. And that's when under Bakker, we were kind of pining for a well-organized, well-disciplined team that could, execute. And now that we're back there, we're going to have the same kind of challenges that we had 3-4 years ago, which is that we don't dominate our attack from strength. We don't finish when we have very few chances, and we are prone to individual errors every now and again.
But important to say that those teams that played in Abu Dhabi were very much sort of second string. Not many of the players there would have started competitive games for Huuhkajat last year.
That's true, with the possible exception of Ojala. But then by the same token, Slovenia's side, I think the most capped player they had was the guy who hit the free kick. And I think in their 23-man squad, there was something like 17 players making their debut. So that's kind of the golden thing, because we did Morocco. That was their competition tournament team. That was their A team, and we did them. It was a bit of a smash and grab, but we got it right tactically, and we performed very well. Then we played Slovenian B team. We fell apart. So it's.
I hope we haven't peaks for the year already in the 3rd week of January.
I think that's the hard. That's the hard thing. We're already better than Bakker. Our mission accomplished.
So it started positively for the national team anyway. That's something, and of course we'll follow up. There are games upcoming in March, Turkey and then Austria, both away.
Yeah, well, Turkey's a qualifier for the World Cup and Austria's a friendly. I did read something because they announced a friendly against Liechtenstein in June. They seem to be, I'm not sure, going away from the idea of last year where we'll play Belgium, Germany, Italy, a strongish Poland, and we'll now play Liechtenstein. And I guess the feeling is that at least if they play a team who, in the FIFA rankings anyway, is worse, then maybe it'll give them some confidence. I don't know.
It's a bit, Is that before the Iceland home game?
Ukraine.
Oh, Ukraine at home. Yeah. I always get this.
They're going to warm up for Ukraine by playing Liechtenstein.
Yeah, so that was my big thing about Germany and Kosovo, is that the two were unrelated. And it doesn't matter if you're gonna if you play a team regardless of the quality that plays in a similar way to your opponent, then at least it's a good start. But I don't know. I don't know. I'll have to do my research on Liechtenstein, but I don't think it's the right preparation. You know what I mean? Because there's no, even if we win, if let's say we smash them 2-0, 3-0.
From 2-0.
When was that? So yeah, but
that shows where we're at in our time.
Mark, we beat the Faroe Islands 3-1, and then I'm trying to think of the last time we scored 3 goals before that. That would have been maybe the Germany game, Germany 3-3. That was 2011, 12. So we don't do 3 goals often. But my point is, even if we win that game, then it'll feel good and we'll be in the right place. But it's Liechtenstein, so you don't, you know what I mean? You don't take that sort of, which means that if we get a draw or if they nick it, then we're, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? We'll be rioting into Turku.
I do wonder. It's one of those things that sort of we touched on the FIFA rankings. It's something that Wales did in their run up to the Euros, and it's sort of credited with how they sort of did okay in their groups and everything. Was they almost played the system, to improve their FIFA rankings, which you have to win games, but you also, it works on averages as well. And the more games you play, technically, the more points you could lose. The new FIFA rankings are going to be out this week or next week. Finland are going to be 99th. Yeah. So despite not playing, and the way that averages work out, and obviously African Cup of Nations and Andorra beating San Marino last week, Finland are going to drop. So obviously there's an element in there, but even if they beat Liechtenstein on paper, it's not really going to improve things. You need to get points in qualifiers. You need to.
So yeah, I mean, so Liechtenstein are, I think, 200 and something or 199, and I don't want to get into the absolute maths of it, but Burkina Faso that I referenced earlier, I think they're 50th in the world right now in the FIFA rankings, and they're going to go up to about 42 just because they had a really good qualification campaign and they did well in the African Cup of Nations. And that being said, they're still not a strong team. They still set up. They don't score a lot. I'm not an expert on Burkina Faso. Let me say that they're not an expert. But the value of playing somebody like Burkina Faso in rankings terms is like it's a jump of like 20 places to us. Yeah. You know what I mean? Whereas if you play Liechtenstein, you're going to move up 1 or 2. And you're right. Wales used the system to get their ranking up, to get themselves into the better pots, to get themselves into the right qualifying space, to attack a tournament. And there's a lot of different ways to pick and choose your opponents. And there's a lot of different ones that we don't engage in. But there's a lot of air in the FIFA rankings that could be exploited.
Let's move on from Huuhkajat. We'll, as I say, come back to that over future episodes. Just looking back at Suomen Cup, there's one comment on the YouTube screen which I can't read it out because there's something there from Utsisproided. But and even though it's in Finnish, I'm not going to say it because some of the people listen to this are Finnish. But anyway, the point he's making is that on Wednesday in Group C of the Suomen Cup is the Studin derby.
Yep.
And did I read somewhere that game's going to be played indoors?
It's outdoors now. They've moved it.
They have moved it.
It was going to be in Tali again.
Yeah, Tali, yeah.
But I think they said on Wednesday or Thursday they're going to play it outdoors. Huuhkajat have actually played, I think, both their home games already outdoors in the Sonera Stadion. So whatever the reason is for this time, it's not, that there is a precedent for it. So they've moved it outdoors.
Okay. And what are we thinking about that? I mean, it looks like Huuhkajat are probably going to win, going on current form. Do we think that the fiery atmosphere in the stadium might melt some of the snow on the terraces?
Well, the weird thing is, obviously, they played in the Liga Cup group last year indoors, and it actually got quite tasty.
Okay.
It's weird because again, it's been 4 or 5 months since the last meeting, and I think almost taking it outdoors will probably cool it off a bit because indoors, it was tight. There was nowhere near the number of people there. It's being played on a Wednesday. I'm not sure if it's afternoon or evening. But last year, you had people literally climbing up, hanging off the rafters at the indoor arena. They were pulling the nets down. I mean, I'm not condoning it, but it was fun to watch. And they were getting involved. And I think I do wonder if part of that, taking it outside, is to almost calm it a little bit.
I was thinking the same.
You can only stick I think it's only about 200-300 people you can put in Dallihalli as spectators. So when you get the hardcore fans that are down there, and there's no partition, there's no special seating arrangement, it gets everybody's in close quarters. So I think Rich is right, is that if you put it in the Sonera, what you'll have then is 200, 300, 400 people in the freezing cold on a Wednesday evening. So I mean, I think I'll probably still go to it though.
I mean, it should be interesting because of what it is, but ultimately it's Huuhkajat will almost certainly top that group, and Huuhkajat are out. So it's for that point of view, it will be virtually a pre-season game.
Save the Pyrotechnic Veikkausliiga.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up this part of the show, and go on to record the bonus podcast, how about we talk about some recent transfers that have caught your eyes?
Okay, well, the one that's caught my eyes purely out of a bit of randomness was Abu Mohammed moving to Lazio. He's a young lad he's from Tampere originally, moved to TPS, and he got scouted in the winter and moved to Lazio, and everyone thought, oh, right, okay, well, it's the standard, young player. He's 18, moving abroad to a big club. He'll spend some time in their academy, and yet as soon as he turned up there, he impressed so much. He got whisked away from their academy team, training in with the first team, and he's been on the bench for the last 3 games, and he'll be on the bench again today for the senior side. Now, I've read some bits and bobs from, again, his agent and an interview with him. Basically he was tagged by someone as the Finnish Pogba, which is ludicrous. But he's turned up at Lazio, and because he is big, he's strong, he's pretty quick. Of course, those sort of comparisons are going to happen, and I imagine it's something that Lazio don't really have a lot of. That he's stood out so much. Their coach is Simone Inzaghi. I don't know what his involvement is, but basically, the lad's 18. He's already on the bench in Serie A. It certainly surprised me because I, thought he'd disappear for a couple of years as they normally do. And the weird thing is, I mentioned it in a Facebook group. A couple of years ago, me and Mrs. N went over to Finland for a weekend just to, one of those where you don't tell anyone you go in. And we were in Tampere on a Sunday night, and TPV were playing. And I didn't realise I actually saw his debut. He came on as a second half sub, and I'll be honest, I don't really remember a lot about it, but it was cold. But he, it's just random. But fair play to him. And there was a story doing the rounds this week, and it's one of those standard. He gave an interview to the Swedish press and was talking about how he ended up there. And he says the Finnish Pogba thing is nonsense. He's more of a Yaya Toure, which doesn't really help.
Not shy, is he? Yeah.
Yeah. But then he said that his agent. I've met him a couple of times. He said that there was interest from Liverpool, and of course the story then got blown up into I almost signed for Liverpool, and it was all over the usual sort of blogs, and Lazio prospect could have signed for Liverpool when in actual fact he had as much chance of signing for Liverpool as I did. It's one of those things, but fair play to him. If he gets even a couple of minutes in Serie A, that's much different from any of the other sort of kids who've moved abroad in recent times.
Yeah, and
what about you, Mark? Anything else that's caught your eye?
Well, just on that one, Lazio 6th in Serie A, and they've got a pretty strong midfield. Like it's obviously impressive that he's up there on the bench, but I mean, he's Parolo, Luis Amperto, Felipe Anderson, Biglia. They're all like internationals. You know what I mean? And that's just an amazing achievement. I think the move that made me happiest was Alex Ring going to New York City FC, because he'd been ploughing a lonely road in Kaiserslautern for a while. He'd had some fallings out with the manager. He'd been sort of forced a couple of times to go into the press and say, I'm not leaving and I'm going to commit my future to the club. But he kept getting moved around in midfield. One week he was defensive midfield, one week he was out on the right, one week he was in number 10 in behind the striker. They just missed out on promotion last season, and then at the start of this season they sunk like a stone and got themselves stuck in a relegation battle. So as it got towards the winter break, he stopped playing. I think I don't know the details of it, but he was a player that was probably too good for where he was. Because Kaiserslautern had been selling a lot of players, and he's now going to step up and then try and replace Frank Lampard at New York City and play next to Andrea Pirlo, which, I mean, if he gets his head down and plays his cards right, is going to be an incredible move for him.
He's been playing in pre-season, and funny, his quote on signing for New York was, I don't want to offend Kaiserslautern, but I'd rather train with Pirlo than with Patrick Ziegler.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
way to burn your bridges, mate.
Yeah, I think I generally get the understanding from a couple of friends in Germany that he had the opportunity to leave at the start of last season, and the club stepped in to try and block it because they said they needed him to grow. So I think he's not been happy there for a long time. And it's the MLS. We mentioned it earlier. It's a growing league. It's got a really good support. New York is one hell of a place. So yeah, so he'll do, I think, really well. I think Juhani Ojala's move as well to Häcken is a good one. They've struggled defensively in the last 10 consecutive seasons in the Allsvenskan. They won the cup last year, but they've always been that sort of mid-table team. So I think he'll get his games, and I think he'll do well. Are there any? There was one. Oh, Puru Soiri. I mean, part of me thinks fine, go and make a bit of money and play in Belarus and get an experience under your belt. But another part of me thinks, who is that? Whatever agency he's working for, they're not looking out for him at all. You know what I mean? That's nobody moves. Nobody moves from the Belarusian league anywhere. I mean, there's a couple that you can go from Belarus. You can go to Kazakhstan or Russia. Maybe not the Russian Premier League, but it's a bit of it seems like a bit of a dead end, and it's just one that has me scratching my head, because last season in the Veikkausliiga he did really well. He scored a lot of goals. I think another season or two like that, then he can get himself on the. He's still young. He can get himself on the attentions of the national team, and then sort of maybe Abu Dhabi or whatever, and then see if he can try and develop that way. But I just it pains me to watch a talented, young, goal-scoring Finnish footballer transfer out of the Veikkausliiga and go to Belarus.
It seems like Yagubi again.
Yeah, it smacks of that.
And how his career basically stalled for 2.5 years, basically because he went to Latvia via a shifty deal in Russia, and then now he's he had a good season at Rops. Now he's at Huuhkajat, but again, he's lost a couple of years of development. And Saudi, he's gone to a team who they came second in the league. It's a one-team league.
Yeah,
let's be honest. It's a shame because, like you said, he's getting into the under-21 squad, and for the sake of whether it's a quick buck or whatever they offered him, who knows? But it's odd.
I think as well, like from a coaching perspective, a lot of the times in Finland, we try and highlight the players that have got skill or ability or technique, and we often overlook, like Puru Soiri, he's quick, he's not technically that brilliant, he's not, he's not like a standout amazing player, but he has a knack of being in the right place at the right time to score goals, and that's something that we need to stick a value on it, because we need players. Like Robert Taylor is a really good example. That the chances that he had for Finland were gilt-edged, and somebody like Soiri would just put him away. And we never seem to value the player that can just get his head down and stick the ball in the back of the net. And I know it's maybe not fashionable, but it just seems like we've let him slip out.
And on that, there was a beginning of a rant there, but I think it just about tempered it. So yeah, let's wrap up this part of the show. Just to thank everyone for watching us or listening to us. Remind you where you can keep in touch with the three of us while in between episodes. So Mark's at fcsuomi.com. Regular reports on Huuhkajat players from around the world, and I guess there can be more and more looking over towards MLS as well, Mark, with Alexander Ring going over there and Jukka Raitala as well going to Columbus Crew.
And Schuller went to Minnesota.
And well represented in MLS. Rich at escapetosuomi.com. Your most recent article, Rich, was very disturbing to read about child abuse in football. I don't want to dwell on that too much, but people can go and check that out on your side. What have you got coming next?
I've got a couple of interviews lined up again. It's again trying to just find the time to do stuff. I've virtually been scheduling stuff on Twitter purely because, again, until the season starts, it's just keeping an eye on things. But yeah, I think interviews are going to be the most upcoming thing anyway.
Okay, and Explore Finland podcast.com. I've published 2 FS shorts episodes, Finnish football shorts episodes. One in January about Asjik's esports team. A few interviews there with people connected to that, which is a bit of a departure for football club in Finland to have a esports, a gaming team, which I think currently sits at two people. One playing NHL hockey and one playing FIFA football competitions. And then, of course, last week was the interview with Sixten Bostrom at Ashiko. If you subscribe to my YouTube channel, you find me by searching for my name, Mark Wiltshire, or search for the Finnish Football Show, and we'll do our best to get the podcast out in a few days. And those listening to this podcast, you'll get the bonus podcast coming a little bit after this one comes out. We're going to stay online now and record that. So for now, this is the end of the Finnish Football Show, and we'll see you again next time. Hi, this is Mark Wiltshire. Welcome to a bonus episode of the Finnish Football Show. This is a bonus podcast from episode 13 that came out recently. As ever, joined by Mark from FC Suomi. Hi, Mark.
Hello, long time.
It's been a long time since we last spoke. And Rich from Escape to Suomi.
Hello again.
Thanks again to everyone joining us live on YouTube. This is same broadcast as episode 13, and so far we haven't lost any listeners. We haven't gained any in all that time between recording. We had quite a few things to talk about in episode 13, so we thought we'd carry on here and talk about those. These are maybe things that are going to start becoming apparent in Finnish football in the future, so not so time sensitive as what we talked about in episode 13. As always, we want your input, so live viewers, there's still that message box on the right hand side of the screen, or ask questions to us. You can still use FFS13 as a hashtag. Podcast listeners use social media to get in touch with us, so our Twitter handles are Mark's at FC Suomi, Rich is at Escape to Suomi, and my handle is at Explore Finland. Rich will carry on straight away. So as ever, no noisy biscuits, no F-bombs. There were none in the last episode, so let's see if we can keep that record going. While we were planning this, a few interesting things were discussed, and as I say, they were looking forward more towards the future. And this Finland identity project was mentioned, which, you know, my role here as the slightly clueless host of this show is well earned, and I hadn't heard of this Finland identity. And I think, Mark, you said you had some things to bring to that.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a bit of a tricky one because it's supposed to be like an all-encompassing development project to try and get Finland kind of back on track in terms of the national team. But it's when you search for it, either through the Paloliito's websites or their Facebook stuff, it's really hard to find like a single source that's like, this is the Finnish identity project. I spoke a couple of times recently with Hannu Tihinen about kind of all the stuff that's going on behind the scenes, and they're doing really tons and tons of great work around coaching education, biomechanics, player advice and consultancy, and working together with the Piirit to help them develop. And they've signed a deal recently with a company called Fibaco that do elite fitness training, like up to a higher standard. So they've got lots and lots of like different activities going on in different parts of the organization, but it seems really difficult to try and piece them all together to build that sort of big picture.
Rich, you were the one that first mentioned this. Is there anything that you want to add about this?
Basically, it's one of those things that obviously it's become fashionable. Even over here in England, it's something that they call it a DNA, England's DNA, where, you know, they the whole school of excellence. It was Lilleshall, is now St George's Park, and they want all the youth teams to play in a certain way, you know. And what you've got is, you know, the supposed figureheads of this latest movement. You've got Mika Aaltonen along with Jari Litmanen and Mika Lipponen, who, you know, will be looking at ingraining, you know, a sort of culture and the DNA throughout every junior team. So it's, you know, it'll be everything from a style of play to how the players are treated, how they're coached, everything about, you know, the mentality. And, you know, they're talking about, you know, it's easy to look at when Germany reboots and, you know, when England say we should copy them, we should copy Spain. Finland seem to be latching onto Belgium as a similar sized country, albeit, you know, with so many different variables. But, you know, even Aaltonen are saying that, you know, in ice hockey, there is a clear pathway in how sort of young players are identified and mentored and brought in, you know, with the ultimate aim of being slotting into that national team as an adult, knowing what exactly they have to do. It's almost like a version of, you know, Cruyff's Total Football, where, you know, these players can slot in and know what they have to do. It's all ingrained into them because that's what they've been doing. How it works, because, you know, for something like this, you need money. You need the will of the Paloliitto to allow it to happen. And the way that the Paloliitto is run virtually by the regional associations as opposed to the centre, you've got to get all of them on board. And everyone needs to sign up to it. It's, you know, with Germany, as we touched on, there's a good book by Honigstein about how after sort of Euro 2000 and the relative failure of only getting the final of 2002 World Cup, they basically tore everything up, ripped it up, started again, and albeit with different aims, but they won the World Cup in 2014. But everything in that organisation is designed to move in the same way. And even little things, you know, someone talked to me, I can't remember who it was now, you know, how do you allow this to happen? And it's little things where, you know, you see the junior sides turning up to competitions and games wearing the kit from 3 years ago because it's been passed down. You know, if you want to make kids feel included, you give them the current kit, you give them access to the materials that, you know, whether it's coaching or playing in this training in the same environment as the seniors. If you've got a 15, 16-year-old kid who looks up to Tim Sparv in midfield or Poyanpalo or Hradetsky in goal, let them train in the same facility, let them watch the training sessions. Everything's done so disparately, where the national team will go off to Abu Dhabi, the under-14s will go off and play Ilves senior team in a pre-season friendly, and some people will play in the Huuhkajat Academy, you know, and play, get them together, get them out in one place. But, you know, with money the way things are at the moment, and, you know, we touched on the WhatsApp about Alea's illness at the moment. You know, he's the figurehead of the VFA. You know, we don't know when he's going to be back, and, you know, he's seriously ill. You know, no matter all his faults, you know, he is the figurehead of the organisation, and the organisation needs a leader, and at the moment it's not the right time, and you know, when he comes back, that may get running. But so much has changed. It really needs everyone signed up and everyone moving in the right direction.
Yeah, as much as we belied Alea for running for re-election unopposed and the ease with which he kind of got back in, it does sort of show the relationship between the Piirit and the Paloliitto, which is that they do need that kind of figurehead to sort of drive and spur on development. And it's a bit, I mean, there's more moving parts than just the Piirit. Like you mentioned, that, you know, let the kids train with the national team guys in their academies. One problem that's currently facing the Paloliitto is that most of the Finnish players that have made it, like properly made it, did so with very little boost from the Palaliito with very little help from either the local organizations or from the National Association. And not saying that they weren't there at the development stage when they were kids, because they were, but most of them hit academies when they were really young and bounced around Europe for a while before landing on a club, finding their feet, working hard and earning it themselves. And that's one particular problem, because while they love to play for there's obviously commitment at the national team level, that sort of connection to the association, it's not there. You know what I mean? There's not that sort of thing that definitely helps them. The other side of it is then as we mentioned in the previous show, kids at 15 signing up deals to go off to academies. Agents, managers, parents, families, they all want the best for the players, and I think there's a lot of short selling in the Finnish game. And I, like Hannu himself was on, I think he was on one of the news outlets saying that kids are leaving too soon. They're not staying in Finland, winning games, developing themselves here. And there's a big sort of elitist view that the Veikkausliiga just isn't good enough. And his response was, well, he stayed when he was a professional. He stayed in the Veikkausliiga till he was like 22. He won 2 cups and a league. And that was exactly what he needed to move on, to understand how to win leagues, how to compete at a pro level, and then move up the kind of through the leagues until he got to regular Champions League appearances. So I think there's a lot of moving parts for the Palaliito, and I think, funnily, like Aaltonen and Tihinen and there's a lot of Lipmanen and advising young players. There's loads and loads of really good work, but it's just not somehow coming together to create this overall picture of a plan forward.
It's funny.
Maybe that's what this Finland identity will start to do.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Lipmanen, being involved, and football's moved on, and it's something that he still watches a lot, clearly. But if Lipmanen was coming through now, I mean, he stayed in Finland, albeit part of it was national service and everything, and the way the game was at the time. But he was 21, going on 22 when he left Finland for Holland. He was playing. I mean, he played hundreds of games in Finland, senior football, coming through at 16, 17. Winning. Won the Suomen Cup in his last game. But if he was coming through now, he'd be picked up at 13, 14 in some regional junior tournament somewhere, and yes, he would benefit from being at an Ajax academy and the technical sort of side of that. But everyone you talk to, they say play football, play senior football.
There's a modern equivalent, which is Teemu Pukki. So if you think about Teemu Pukki, and I came to this sort of I had a look at this. There's a documentary about the Huuhkajat and their qualification program for 2016. So the Miksu era, basically. And in that, there was an interview with Lukas Radetsky as he left Brøndby and went to Frankfurt, and he was talking about Teemu Pukki, about what's it going to be like is Teemu going to be okay when you leave? And he was joking and saying, I don't know, because the guy's never bought a plate and a spoon and a fork in his life. But as it went on, what you found out is that when Teemu Pukki left Finland for Sevilla when he was 16, his mum had to go with him. You know what I mean? Because he was a young kid, he didn't speak Spanish. He was thrown basically into a very large academy with an education system bolted on, but he had no friends, no contacts, no nothing. And very much to your point is that if Litti came through now, he'd follow that same path, but he'd be isolated. So he wouldn't be like a fully developed, grown up man who goes out shopping and makes friends and breaks through the banter of a dressing room. If you put a kid through that process, it's a really different thing, and you need a different environment around it. And I think that's one of the core problems that's facing the young Finnish footballers today.
And it's funny because I mean, again, dropping a name, I met Jesse Orinen for a coffee a couple of weeks ago, and he's saying how he wanted to leave Fulham last summer, but they exercised the option on his contract to stay for this season, to play in the League Cup, and now all he does is play the occasional under-23 game for Fulham, but he wants to play first-team football. He's living in, admittedly, a very nice place in Rains Park, it's very nice, but ultimately, his ultimate dream is to play football. He had, he played some first-team football. He's still in Finland squads, He's been over here since he was 16,
and
he's played maybe a dozen senior games for Fulham. He's trying to leave. They won't let him, even though they won't let him play. So he's having to wait until his contract expires.
So when would he'd have signed that contract? What is he now? 22, 23?
23.
Yeah, so he'd have signed that contract when he was 18, and I guarantee the day he signed that contract, he didn't give it it didn't give two thoughts to the extension and the terms and all the other stuff on the other side. And that's the job of a good agent. Will say, look, kid, if you put yourself down for a 4-year contract with another year option, this is gonna this could go. We all want it to go this way. We all believe that you'll be, a Premier League goalkeeper in the next 3 years. But if it doesn't, you'll be stuck here. You know what I mean? And I really feel for him because he's a top quality keeper. But it's once you're in that contract, you're stuck.
Yeah. With goalkeepers, it's always that little bit more. It's a slightly different situation because even if you're in your own country, there's only one position in one club that you can be you can be put into. So, but you often see it, don't you? That goalkeepers play that number 2 role for quite a long time. Okay, he's not necessarily even playing the number 2 role, but they come through later. They have generally a longer career as a goalkeeper than as a central midfielder. But I think this is something we talked about many times, and we will continue talking about. Is players leaving too early, and I think it's around the world. Players leaving clubs too early or getting sucked into these academies that develop technical players that can only play academy football.
Yeah,
and don't make the breakthrough into men's.
Well, look at Barcelona. Barcelona have probably the most famous club academy anyway in the world, and yet they cannot produce a forward. They have to buy South American forwards. Yeah, Lionel Messi came through their system, but he was an Argentinian player who played on the street. Suarez, again, similar. Neymar, slightly different. He was more futsal, but he, and every time he gets fouled, he looks to the ref. But, these are players that you can't produce because Finland, and you're seeing in certainly the under-21 and below, the players who've gone off to the academies. I'll take Glenn Kamara as an example. He's been at Arsenal for a number of years now. Technically, on the ball, in space, very, very good footballer. Put him under pressure. The kid is probably 6 stone wet through. When he made his Arsenal debut at Hillsborough against Sheffield Wednesday a couple of years ago, he looked absolutely lost. And all my mates who went to the game said, he needs a plate. Sputs, he's tiny. And these men, 6'4", clogging centre-halves, ruined him, and the fact is, because he's so used to playing nice, sanitized football and in an environment where he doesn't have to not necessarily think for himself, but everything's catered for him, everything's done for him. He gets lifts everywhere. You've got South American clubs who are artificially putting in obstacles to kids to make them learn how to problem solve, where it's make your own way to the ground, or your kit's not, you've got to wash your own kit, or this, that, and the other, clean your own boots. They've got to put these in because, life as well is different. But, you've got to give these kids a problem to solve to grow. As we said with Litti, he went and did national service while he was playing for Huuhkajat. And he was a man when he went to Ajax. He was 21, 22. He'd grown up so much more than the kids now. Look at Maximus Tainio, the most brilliant name I've ever heard. He signed for Spurs, and his dad is a huge part of that. And his dad was, on the books of Spurs as a sort of academy coach type. But he's going to go as soon as he hits 16. He's going to move to London. There's Vaitanen, who's at FC Yaz. As soon as his 16th birthday, he moves to Liverpool. And they've both. Well, Vaitanen has played in the Suomen Cup this year. He's 15. He played a couple of weeks ago against Yarrow. And Maximus Tainio, he's nowhere near Huuhkajat's team, but he's been playing, competitive football. And now all of a sudden they are going to go into the realms of these clubs where even Sutton United, and I'd say they're my local team, they've got 900 boys on, or 900 players on their books, and this is Sutton United, bottom half of the 5th division in England, 900 kids, and how many of them are going to make it?
But it's the double whammy though, because not only is it tough then for that 16-year-old to go out and then basically break through that academy. I mean, Liverpool's academy. How many? It doesn't. It's not like it used to be. It's not the boot room it used to be, where they would churn out 4 or 5 players a season. So it puts that 16-year-old in a really competitive environment that has a really low probability for success, but it also takes quality that it was burgeoning in the Veikkausliiga. So people complain about the Veikkausliiga not being competitive enough, and it's not, because it's being gutted every year. Because the kids who could come through to make a difference, that could have an impact at this level, that could push players to run faster, to be quicker, to be fitter, they're not getting pitch time because they're buggering off to academies.
And we'll see it in the,
well, let's talk
Champions
about...
League. Oh, sorry.
No, go on. Let's carry on.
We'll see it in the Champions League this year. Mariehamn will be it'll be the second qualifying round they go into. People will look at them and go, how the hell did they win the Finnish league? Because you're going to look at their team, and half of it's going to be different.
Yeah.
Admittedly, there are other factors, but their goalkeeper Vitala, he's gone to Denmark.
Yeah.
You've got two key players up front. Assis and Orgill have gone.
Yeah.
Orgill's gone to Austria, and Assis went to Thailand.
Yeah.
And and over the last couple of years, they've lost other players. Now, Mariehamn is a very different club to even in Finland. It's very much, is an island. It's a very odd situation. But any time, and it happens in most countries, any time a team does well that's not the norm, that team is going to get stripped for parts.
Yeah, and I mean, like, if you look at how did Mariehamn achieve it? How did they win it? They played deep, 4-4-2, hit long balls in the break to the two brilliant guys up front who create space and score.
And they played the same player, and I think 3 or 4 of their players played every game.
Yeah,
they had the same defence for the whole season, and they were lucky with injuries, but they had a very small squad who played a lot of minutes.
We're stretching into like Veikkausliiga preview territory. I could talk all day about what's going to happen.
Let me redirect us a little bit before we get there, because we talked about the Finland Identity Project and about young Finnish players transferring overseas. So let's maybe pull a couple of those things together and talk about the UEFA Under-19s. What do they call it? Under-19 Championship, which we mentioned probably back in FFS 12 that this was going to, the finals of this were going to be held in Seinäjoki and Vaasa next year in 2018. So I thought that maybe this is something that I could bring to the there's not really a great deal of information yet about the 18 competition because there's still the 2017 competition to take place, which is going to be in Georgia. But maybe just to give people a little bit of a taste of how this competition works, just looking at the road to the final. This is generic information on the UEFA.com/under-19. So if anyone wants to look it up, you can find some stuff on there. And what it says, if I click on the link that says standings, it's got a bit of information. Road to the final. I'll just read this out. The UEFA European Under-19 Championship consists of 3 distinct stages: the qualifying round, the elite round, and the final tournament. Qualifying round. This is played in autumn and is made up of 13 groups of 4 teams playing in a 1-venue mini-tournament. The top 2 from each progress alongside the best placed third place team. Hold on, I'm going to do that again and edit it out of the podcast.
Oh wait, can I say fuck?
No, we can now. I'm going to edit that out as well. Now zip it. Qualifying round. The qualifying round, played in autumn, is made up of 13 groups of 4 teams playing in 1-venue mini-tournaments. The top 2 from each progress alongside the 3rd place team with the best record against the top pair in their group. Elite round. In the elite round, played in the spring, qualifiers join the top seed, given a bye, in 7 mini tournament groups of 4. The group winners then join the hosts in the final. Final tournament. The 7 qualifiers plus the hosts are split into 2 groups of 4 who play each other once, with the top 2 progressing to the semi-finals, and the winners of those ties contest the final. And then there's a link for the official criteria for separating teams and whatever. So there's obviously the 2017 competition, which has had the qualifying stage at the end of last year, and the elite games are going to take place in later in March, actually. So they take place in the space of 1 week. So there's 3 games in the space of 1 week in this elite round that then to the finals, which this year is in Georgia. And as I was looking through here, Finland are in this elite round. They're in Group 1. They're playing their games in the Netherlands, in a group with Greece, the Netherlands, and Ukraine. So that doesn't look like an easy group, but I think this is probably worth us following this year's competition throughout the Finnish football show, and then picking it up again in the autumn when it's the sort of the road to Pokemon.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think the Ukraine have gone through something similar to us recently in that they've tried to revamp their production, like their player production system. Greece, I don't know that much about, but at least on the national team level, they're in a bad way. And economically, as a country, they don't have a lot to spend. So I'd imagine, I guess, as always, if we can get something out of the Netherlands in that group, we should be in a relatively decent position to progress.
Yeah, just to give people some dates, it's Netherlands versus Finland on the 23rd of March. Then we have Greece versus Finland on the 25th of March. And Finland versus Ukraine on the 28th of March. So, probably by the time we get together for team, we might be able to have a bit of an update on here and see how the young Huuhkajat have got on and whether they're going to be going to Georgia in the summer.
It's funny as well, since they announced, it was almost 2 years ago now, that Finland would host the tournament, Paloliitto have identified the age group that will be participating as hosts in that tournament, and have been, as much as they can, sort of preparing them for, knowing which players should be involved, because it will be the ones born in 1999, which makes me feel horribly old. But you've got players who are, people we've talked about on this podcast. We've got Abukar Mohammed, just signed at Lazio, Sergei Romenko. Players who are, again, but going back to the same problem, on the books at Everton, West Brom, Stoke, Hamburg. It's difficult. You're not expecting players of that age to get through to senior football, but at least this group of players has been identified, has been treated with, right, you will be the core of that squad unless anyone else happens to emerge. And at least they're doing that preparation. So when it comes to the pre-tournament, the dress rehearsal this summer in Seinäjoki, those players will be involved and will get a little taste of where they'll be playing.
What can you tell us about that competition, Rich?
It's only going to be a 4-team sort of, and even then it's going to be, I think, from what I understand, is Germany, Portugal and Holland who'll be sending teams over. And it's a bit of a dress rehearsal for, the organising committee at Seinäjoki and everything, just to get some logistics going, because, it's a new stadium, first of all. And also, the tournament next year, it's a UEFA tournament. They have expectations. It's not just a turn up and everything. And it's a little bit of, it's a friendly tournament. There's nothing a lot riding on it from a player point of view, but they'll be playing their peers, and from Finland's point of view, they'll be playing teams that might be qualified for that tournament. They'll be playing teams that have, you look at the teams they're talking about, Germany, Holland and Portugal, who are, we look at and say at senior level, generally, maybe not Holland at the moment, but you've got Portugal, European champions, Germany, men's world champions, and Holland, who seem to float between good and awful. But, look at the players they produce.
But Portugal's youth system, though, it's lethal. They demolished. Was it England in last year's under-21s? And I think they did something stupid, like they won every age category. They've won every age category in the last 4 years or something like that. So their youth development is insane.
They've got an 18-year-old playing for Bayern Munich at the moment, and he's playing regularly. And he played in the Euros. He won the European Championships. He might be 19 now, but this is what they're up against, and this is what the players can only learn from. And imagine if they turn around and say in 18 months' time, they've got players who are playing, hopefully, getting the odd bit of exposure, but at those clubs, it's not too bad at all. And if they get that mindset, which is difficult to acquire, but if you get into the mindset of, we will be competing in an elite tournament where, especially it's different from, say, under 16, under 17 football, where so much can change. These kids will be 19 years old. There will be, not a lot's going to change. They will be on their pathway, and the scouts of Europe will be watching that tournament, whether it's a good or bad thing, but they will be there and watching these players play.
There could be some good quality football here this summer, then, even just in this warm-up competition. Do you know, Rich, are some of those games being played in Vasa? Because obviously the finals next year will be in both stadiums, so I'm assuming they'll need some sort of preparation as well.
As far as I'm aware, it's only in Seinäjoki. I don't know if they're doing either hosting certain things in Vasa or how they're going to operate that. But this has come from Asiko that they'll be hosting this tournament or this get together. But
something else for me to keep my eyes open for this summer then.
Yeah,
good stuff. Okay, I reckon that we've probably come to the end of our bonus pod. There's no news broken in the last 30 seconds that you want to tell us about, Mark?
No,
okay, good stuff. Well then, let me just remind everyone about our sites. There's fcsuomi.com with regular reports on Huuhkajat players from around the world. There's escapetosuomi.com, and Rich has got a couple of interviews in the pipeline, so hopefully they'll start to come along soon. And then explorefinlandpodcast.com with the recent episodes, FFS, Finnish football, the recent Finnish football shorts episodes, interviews with various people at Asiko, which you'll find on there. Remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel where we broadcast this show. Search for my name, Mark Wiltshire, or search for Finnish Football Show. You'll find us there. And the next podcast, I guess, we'll probably record sometime towards the end of March, when after this under 19s qualifying games have taken place. Give us something topical to talk about then as well.
Sounds good.
Sounds good, yeah.
Mark, Rich, thanks a lot for joining me again, and we'll meet again soon.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye. Yeah.